Hey everyone, welcome to Mr. Geopolitics, and today, more breaking news. The Ukrainians have liberated even more territory in every direction. They have liberated, at this point, according to this map, about 4,000 square kilometers. So, and that looks like it's going to turn into 5,000 square kilometers soon. Maybe probably even more, because it seems that the breaking news out of Ukraine now on the Izium Kharkiv front is that the Russians have left Kupiansk. At first we got some conflicting reports, but now it's beginning to become more clear. The picture is beginning to materialize. Yes, the Russians have decided to leave Kupiansk, and they have decided to leave Izium as well, since the Ukrainians were planning to launch an offensive against Liman. They were sending armored vehicles and convoys towards Liman right here. So, and that wouldn't have been good for the garrison in Izium, which is apparently a decent sized garrison. It was supposed to be a strong garrison, but one thing the Russians have accomplished well during this entire this recent counteroffensive in this region, the Kharkiv Izium region. One thing the Russians have done well is that they have avoided getting encircled. We haven't seen any large, or even a couple hundred Russian troops getting encircled. We haven't seen that. You could say they're good at running, but hey, live to fight another day, right? So all that equipment, all those trained personnel, those soldiers, they basically, what happened in this region, how I would describe it, is that Russia is suffering from manpower problems, right? But before I get into that, let's look at a few more maps. This map just recently changed and showed us this bulge right here. This bulge right here that the Ukrainians have taken, heading towards the Russian border. And in the last hour or so, we've heard that the Russians are leaving Kupiansk, the city of Kupiansk. So finally, and this is the capital of the Kharkiv region for this general vicinity, this general area. This is the capital, Kupiansk, from what I hear. So yeah, the Russians, I guess, it seems like they're going to be crossing the river, the Oskol River, and they're going to be using the Oskol River as a defensive barrier, hoping that will hold the Ukrainians back, and they're probably going to set up defensive lines behind the Oskol River. Anyways, let's look at a few more maps before we continue discussing this. So this is what it looked like about 2 days ago now. Yeah. So this area in the eastern sector was still contested, right? Then it looked something like this. So I'll zoom in, right? And it would look like something like this. A group of Ukrainian troops moved to the north, and the Ukrainians got to the Oskol River. As you can see, here it was contested. They were moving towards the Oskol River at Senkove, right here, but they made it there. And the next map is from a couple hours later. The Ukrainians began moving south. They reached the Oskol River at Senkove, and they started moving south towards Izium. And then we got some information that the Russians were basically pounding Ukrainian positions with artillery, and with airstrikes, and according to Rybar, these maps are by Rybar, by the way. According to him, well, that's wishful thinking. Operational encirclement of the armed forces of Ukraine grouping. No, that didn't happen. Maybe the Russians would have wanted to encircle the Ukrainians here, but this area was disputed for a while. But in the end, basically we have this, where the Russians, maybe it was a last-minute decision, but they decided to leave Kupiansk. And they just decided, I guess, that the situation west of the river was untenable. So they decided to withdraw. And then we got reports that the Ukrainians were at Izium. There was a picture of a flag. Didn't show any troops, though. But yeah, it seems now we're getting reports that the Russians have decided to leave Izium. It's not 100% confirmed, but it seems all but certain. It started with the Ukrainians being repulsed from the city. Initially, they tried to attack the city yesterday. They weren't able to reach it. Then today we got some pictures of the Ukrainian soldiers in the west of the city. And then I guess the Russians decided that their situation was untenable, unsustainable, especially with the threat from the southeast. They didn't want to have their soldiers encircled, so they simply decided to withdraw, it seems. Yeah, so what can I say about this? Basically it's a manpower issue. Since the Ukrainians began their counteroffensive, they were, I believe, a few weeks, a month or so into the war, when the war began, the Ukrainians, they were talking about launching a counteroffensive in June, then it turned to July, then August. Then many people thought they wouldn't do it. But in late August, they did launch a counteroffensive, and first it was in the Kherson region, where they had said they would attack. And in the Kherson region, not much has changed. The Ukrainians took Vysokopilia, which is a village. They took that. And basically that's about all they did. That was their biggest achievement. Further down south, they crossed the Ingolets River. They set up a bridgehead at Suki Stavok, but as you can see, they've pretty much been stuck there since then. And what seems to happen is the Russians keep blowing up the pontoon bridges here. The Ukrainians fix the pontoon bridges, cross over south, send more reinforcements, and then the Russians don't do anything about it. Then they blow up the pontoon bridges. The Ukrainians are stuck, and they bomb the living shit out of them, and they keep bombing them with artillery, airstrikes, you name it. So this situation here, the Ukrainians don't seem to be giving up very easily, but it seems like something of I don't know if I don't think it's I'm not sure if the Ukrainians are going to be able to be successful in this specific bridgehead, just because the river is right here and it's so easy for the Russians to disrupt their supply lines. The latest developments are that the Ukrainians took they had taken Ternovi Podi right here, And now they've taken 2 more hamlets south, but I mean that's not that big of a deal. We're gonna have to see how it develops. But I mean, you look at these settlements that the Ukrainians have taken. I mean, you look at this one. It's basically like 2 streets, right? And it's tiny. It's not even 1 kilometer squared, right? So it's pretty tiny, right? So and so yeah, the Russian military leadership in charge of this area did a decent job holding back the Ukrainians. They've done a decent job. Then at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the Ukrainians tried twice to seize the power plant, but they failed both times. They lost about 400 elite troops. These are not regular soldiers or conscripts. These are elite troops that were trained in the UK, apparently. Yeah, so that was a failure, and everything looked good for the Russians, but then the Ukrainians launched a surprise counteroffensive near Izium, and there had been word that the Ukrainians had been building up, that there had been a buildup of troops and equipment near this region, near south of Kharkiv, but the Russians didn't take it seriously, or whichever general was in charge of this, he was probably going to get sacked now, relieved of his duty at the least. He obviously didn't take it seriously, or maybe the senior leadership didn't want to send reinforcements. But what seems to have happened is that the Ukrainians, they just sent forth their troops, and they had overwhelming numbers. Because when you go on the offensive, you're supposed to outnumber the enemy 3-1. It seems the Ukrainians had those kind of numbers. I'm not sure how many troops the Russians had here, but from what I've heard, the Ukrainians have close to 15,000 troops altogether. Maybe the Russians have 5,000, maybe they had 3,000, I don't know. But whatever it was, it wasn't enough. And the Russian Air Force... Now, we all know the Ukrainian Air Force is on life support. They're barely functioning. The Russian Air Force, why weren't they able to intervene and do anything? Well, there is speculation that they're low on precision-guided munitions, and also it's the air defenses. The Ukrainians have a lot of Soviet era air defense systems. And why can't the Russians take those air defense systems out? Why can't they destroy them? Because the Ukrainians don't even have them turned on all the time. So the Russians can't really figure out exactly where they are now. If the Ukrainians don't have them turned on all the time, then how are they using them? Well, they have a network of spotters on the ground, and they also have intelligence from NATO. Via satellite and through AWACS planes. NATO collects intelligence, and that intelligence has been vital to the Ukrainians. That's how the Ukrainians destroyed the Moskva, the flagship of the Russia's Black Sea Fleet. It was, I guess, close to Odessa, you could say. That's how the Ukrainians did that. They destroyed the Moskva. The intelligence has been really vital. One thing I will mention is that we have gotten some video evidence that there are some foreigners. There seems to be a decent number of foreign mercenaries or foreign volunteers, whatever you want to call them, that are fighting with the Ukrainian troops. And these Ukrainian troops fighting in this area are basically the cream of the crop of what Ukraine has left. One other thing I should mention is that they seem to be using a lot of foreign equipment. So a lot of M113s destroyed American armored vehicles. The one before the Bradley, it was called the M113. A lot of Humvees. A lot of there's some Turkish Kirpi trucks, which are large MRAP trucks. What else? They also have the tanks. Almost all the tanks we see now, the Ukrainians operating, seem to be from former Soviet states like Poland and I believe Bulgaria and whatnot. So here's the thing: the Russians in Ukraine have something like 170,000 troops. I read a report yesterday that said they have something like 170,000 troops. Now, with 170,000 troops spread out over all this territory, which is like something like, we can measure it, but it's something like, just rough measurement. Very rough measurement. But I mean, this is like 800, 900 kilometers or 600 mile front. It's not a small front, and for the Russians to have 170,000 troops, it just simply doesn't seem to be enough. Now, what could the Russians do about it? Well, here's the thing: the Russians have a regular army of 1 million troops. Okay. But that some people say that number is exaggerated, and at the same time, that number is spread out to administrators, accountants, because every army, you can't function without people handling your logistics, the paperwork, all that. And then on top of that, you have the Air Force, the Navy, and Russia, and then whatever remains from that. I mean, Russia has a lot of territory they need to protect. So let's say Russia has like 400,000 troops altogether, or even 500,000, but they need troops to defend their territory, right? They need reserves. They can't just send everything to Ukraine, right? It just doesn't, that's not how, that doesn't make sense, right? So there are a lot of Russian warhawks who have who are not that, don't seem to be too happy with Putin's reluctance to declare war, because if Vladimir Putin declared war on Ukraine, formally declared war, that would enable him to activate and mobilize 2 million reserves. So the Russians have 2 million reserves. They have more equipment. They have thousands and thousands of tanks. In Wikipedia it says they have 10,000 tanks in storage, but Covert Cabal, which is a channel on YouTube, he recently spent hours looking at satellite photos, and he believes they have something more like 4,000 tanks that are usable. But still, 4,000 tanks, that the Russians could potentially use. So it's not a problem of equipment. It's a manpower issue, and it seems more and more like the only solution would be for Russia to declare war. I mean, another good thing for the Russians is that right about now, in the last week or so, is when right about when this counteroffensive started, is when the Russians were in the middle of sending 45,000 to 65,000 fresh troops to the front, and that's had an effect, because if we look at the other fronts, like if we look at right here, this is showing us Kodema. The Russians are actually on the offensive there, right? And in Bakhmut and Soledar today, the Russians the fresh Chechen troops who have arrived, along with the Wagner mercenaries, they have apparently taken some territory, not anything close to what the Ukrainians have taken, but they've moved forward. They've taken they've moved ahead. That's what I can say. They've moved ahead, and they're determined. The Chechens are saying they're going to take Bakhmut in the next couple weeks, so that remains to be seen. But they seem pretty determined. Yeah, so at Kodema, I'll show you on this map where Kodema is. This is Soledar. The Russians are moving forward. Bakhmut, the Russians are moving forward. So at Kodema, you see this bulge. Yeah, so the Russians are moving, are determined to move forward from Kodema. It took, I believe, months of fighting to take Kodema. And also at Pisky, the Ukrainians tried launching a counter-offensive, but that failed. And the Russians have been trying for months to clear Pisky. And the Ukrainians today launched a counteroffensive, but it failed. What they're trying to do here altogether is to basically encircle Avdiivka. And Avdiivka is a very strong, very, very powerful in terms of its fortifications. It's a very well fortified position. There's entrenchments. The Ukrainians have spent 7 years preparing, but this area is well entrenched. There are networks of there's networks of trenches. There are networks of bunkers. There's a lot of bodies of water here, which act as natural barriers. So yeah, the Russians definitely want to end up taking Avdiivka. They want to take Avdiivka because the Ukrainians have continuously bombed Donetsk city for the last couple of months, and oftentimes civilians die, and that's one problem the Russians want to solve. How else are they trying to solve that problem? Well, in the south right here, the Russians have recently gained some territory, and they are it seems that they are outside Volodar, this town, Volodar. And the whole point is to move on to this highway. And because if they cut off this highway, they will cut off the supply lines to all the Ukrainian units here in this region. And that will take some pressure off Donetsk city, right? And that's the whole point of Avdiivka. The whole point is to take pressure off Donetsk city because the lines here, you see this dark red line. This is from before the war. So the lines here haven't changed that much. This is one of the most well fortified areas in the entire country, in all of Ukraine. So the Russians are determined to crack this nut, and the Russians are also determined to take Seversk and Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and that would liberate all the territories of the Donetsk region, because the Russians have already liberated all the territory of the Luhansk region. This is the city of Luhansk. And to the north is all the territory of the Luhansk Oblast. So the Luhansk People's Republic, which Russia supports, already have all their territory liberated. The Oskol River basically separates the Kharkiv region from Luhansk. So for the Russians, not all is lost. I mean, their troops didn't get encircled or destroyed. And here's the thing: territory is one thing, losing territory is one thing, but losing troops are irreplaceable, because during the Iran-Iraq war, there's a famous quote where a tank officer was arguing with another officer, and the other officer told him, a tank is only worth a couple $1 million and a few months to build. A soldier takes 18 years to build. And that's true. I mean, soldiers are irreplaceable sometimes, and sometimes it's not about just having the numbers, because at the end of World War II, Nazi Germany still had millions of soldiers, right? But they still lost the war, because you see, when a country initiates a war, the first line of soldiers that they have are always the best. They're the cream of the crop. They're the best qualified. They're the best that were picked out from, the best candidates from among a pool of candidates that were picked out for the job, right? Now, once if those soldiers die, then you have your secondary candidates who are still motivated, still qualified, maybe less so, maybe less competent, but they're still qualified. But if they're taken out, the second tier is taken out, then you have, if you get my point. Eventually you get to the point where you have people that don't even want to fight, right? You have people that are somewhat motivated but incompetent. Then you have people that are incompetent and unmotivated. Then you have people that are, that just do not want to fight. And throughout this war, we've seen dozens of videos coming out from Ukraine. And all of them are from the territorial defense. And a lot of them are complaining about their conditions. And because initially the territorial defense, they were formed to defend their own territory. But then, a lot of them were sent to the front. And especially when Russia was, after the first phase of the war, when the Russians left, withdrew from Kharkiv and Kiev, and they went on they started a massive artillery barrage on the Donbass region. And when they were taking all of this territory you see in the east right here, colored in red, at that point there were cases, and this is from the mouth of the Ukrainian conscripts themselves, there were cases when Ukrainian conscripts would get training for a few weeks or even days, and they would get sent to the front. And in some cases, they had Maxim machine guns from World War I. They didn't have enough bullets. They didn't have enough fuel. One thing is for sure: without NATO, especially looking at all the armored vehicles and weapons the Ukrainians have now, without NATO, Ukraine would have lost this war, I think, a long time ago, because right now they're attacking this whole offensive. They used tanks from former Soviet states that are now part of NATO, like Poland. They have M113s. There's a lot of footage of destroyed M113s. They're using HIMARS, intelligence from the U.S. Of what to hit. I mean, you can have the HIMARS, but if you don't have the intelligence, I mean, the U.S. is feeding them intelligence, right? And the U.S. is, you could argue, number one in the world when it comes to gathering intelligence with their... I mean, look, here's the thing. The Russians, they also have spy satellites. They also have a large air force. But here in this region, the Ukrainians simply outplayed them, okay? Whoever was in charge of this... I think the Russians got caught by surprise, and whoever was in charge of... the general who was in charge of defending this region, basically, you could say he's incompetent, or he just failed in his job, because Like I said, we heard reports about the Ukrainians building up armor, building up troops in this region, but and the thing is, one of the reasons the Ukrainians moved so quickly is because they knew they had the numbers advantage. They knew they had a 3-to-1 advantage. They knew they surprised the Russians, and they didn't want to give the Russians time to be able to send reinforcements to even the odds. So what the Ukrainians have achieved here is probably their greatest victory in the war. At the least since Kiev and Kharkiv, since the Russians withdrew. But altogether, looking at Ukraine, looking at the big picture, it's still a mixed bag, because the Russians are down, but they're not out. They had to withdraw from all this territory, but now they're behind this river, which is a good defensive barrier, which acts as a natural defensive barrier. And they have the vast majority of their troops and equipment. They've been able to salvage. And this region is right by the Russian border, so the Russians could always launch another counteroffensive, right? And the Russians, and now the gig is up. The Ukrainians have exposed their troops. The Russians have recently been pounding Ukrainian positions with artillery and with airstrikes. And don't think the Ukrainians were able to take this region without sustaining casualties, because we're hearing reports already of the Russians say that the Ukrainians have 2,000 killed in action. I don't believe that, but a couple hundred, 500, maybe 1,000 killed in action, which would put their casualties at a few thousand. Yeah, could be. We're hearing reports about hospitals in, I believe it was Balaklia, asking citizens to donate blood. And there are videos. I put a video on my channel. There's videos of convoys of ambulances in Ukrainian territories. Like 6, 10 or more ambulances just rushing back and forth. So the Ukrainians are paying a price for these gains. It doesn't come for free. But at the end of the day, this war altogether, for me, there's still more questions than answers. I mean, you think about it, how will it end? Will there be negotiations? Will the Ukrainians be able to replicate their success here? Because in Kherson region, they haven't been that successful. It doesn't seem like they will be. From what I've seen so far, I mean, basically, you have Vysokopilia, which they took, and then you have the David Brid region, which is a sector, which is basically like a little cauldron. So, the Ukrainians have done well. They've done really well this week, but they have a long way to go, and now their troops are exposed, and the Russians will target those troops, and that will take a toll on them. The thing is, here's one question. If the Ukrainians are using mostly foreign equipment now, mostly equipment from the Americans and the Poles and whatnot, and from Turkey, so what happened to all the other equipment? Guess what? It was destroyed. Russia has destroyed most of Ukraine's armored vehicles and tanks that they originally had. That's why I said if it wasn't for NATO, Ukraine would have lost a long time ago, because they wouldn't have anything to attack the Russians with. They wouldn't have armored vehicles. They wouldn't have tanks, right? Anyways, another question, will there be a winter offensive? because throughout history, the winter has benefited the Russians. And in the EU right now, in some countries, the price of heating is 8 times what it was a year ago. 8 times. There's protests. People are burning their bills. Last week we saw a protest in Prague with 70,000 people, and the politicians are dismissing them as pro-Russians or Russian propagandists. But I mean, 70,000 people. I mean, look, all I can say is this: if this winter is going to be extremely cold, extremely intense, then the EU, that's going to put pressure on the EU, and they might decide to pressure the Ukrainians to end this war. Especially if the Ukrainians won't be able to replicate if the Ukrainians are not able to continue this offensive, and if they're not able to replicate this kind of success they've had in this region, in the Kharkiv Izium region, first taking Balaklia and then the rest, if they're not able to do that, then I don't know how long. The question is, the Americans, I think, don't care as much, but the Europeans, in my mind, they should have built nuclear power plants, but they didn't. They wanted to go green, but at the end of the day, Russian gas is cheap. It's direct. It comes right through pipelines. You can replace it with LNG, but it costs several times more. And the question is, here's the thing: is it sustainable? Even if, first of all, there isn't enough natural gas. There aren't enough supplies to replace the Russian natural gas right now. There just aren't. There just isn't. And the Europeans don't even have the infrastructure for that much LNG. And there aren't any other suppliers with that much natural gas. But even if there was enough LNG, it's cost several times more. And is it sustainable for any country to pay like 4 times more, 3 times more for natural gas, for electricity? I don't think so. So, yeah, I mean, the EU is definitely under pressure. And and another question I'm thinking of is, will the Russians declare war? Will the Russians finally declare war and stop playing games? Or are they just going to continue this special military operation and continue trying to fight a war where they're outnumbered, 170,000 troops? Well, again, armies that go on the offensive should outnumber the enemy's 3-1. The Ukrainians have at least that many troops, if not more. And Zelensky recently said, we have a 1 million-man army, but even if you cut that in half, 500,000, okay, 500,000, it just doesn't add up, right? What the Russians have been able to achieve with the troops, with the number of troops they have, is actually remarkable. Because when they went into this war, it was 150 to 200,000 troops. And it was a 1,400 kilometer front, right? Now, when the Americans went into Iraq, right? I mean, you look at this front from the beginning. Look at it. Look. Right? Yeah, 1,400 kilometers, right? Okay. Now, that front actually is as wide as the front that when the last time a country fought on a front that large, waged war on a front that large, was when the Nazis actually were waging war against the Soviet Union, and that was from Leningrad all the way to Crimea. And you can see it's about 1,500 kilometers. Yeah. So, I gotta get rid of this. Anyways, but the Germans had 2 million troops, right? But that was World War II. Okay. So let's look at Iraq. When the Americans went into Iraq, realistically, most of Iraq is deserts, right? All this area here is deserts. It's all deserts except for these highways. These network of highways are what basically are the arteries which make up Iraq, right? I mean, and they follow they go from north to south following the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. In ancient Sumeria and Babylon, Mesopotamia, civilization was based around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which go from north to south. And you see these highways. The Americans had 375,000 troops, more than twice as many as the Russians had when they attacked Ukraine. And how wide is this front to take these highways and go north? I mean, that's 100 kilometers, right? But let's say you want to stretch it. Okay, how long is the entire front? 300 kilometers at the most, but it wasn't even that wide. So the Americans were basically fighting. They had twice as many troops fighting on a front, I don't know, 1/8 the size, arguably, a quarter the size, 1/8 the size. So, I mean, it's, I don't know. You could argue that Russia might not be able to even achieve all their goals if they don't declare war, but anyways, we're going to have to see what happens. I've been yapping for a while, so I'm going to stop here. But anyways, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, comment and share, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.